This is Michael Popok. It's After Dark. Do you know where your legal AF is? Let's talk about, speaking of dark, let's talk about John Roberts, because we have to. Chief Justice John Roberts has turned out to be, based on some investigative reporting in the New York Times, he's effectively the Kaiser Soze of the United States Supreme Court. Let me mix my movie references. He is the Barzini. It's Barzini all along. We always thought that John Roberts was sort of put upon, and he was being dragged and pulled to the right and the alt-right by Sam and Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas. Wrong. The reporting now shows with a leaked memo. Yes, we have another leaked memo on this United States Supreme Court, the third one in 2 years, which is 3 more than any other time in the history of the United States Supreme Court. What does that tell you about people's respect for the court? Even the moles are letting things leak out of there that never happened before. But now we've learned that Chief Justice Roberts put all the gears in motion in order to write all 3 decisions that benefited Donald Trump over the summer. It was him all along. And we talk about it. We break it down with my co-anchor, Karen Friedman-Agnifilo. Take a listen. So let's have you lead, as is appropriate, on the Supreme Court revelations. Another leaked memo, another Chief John Roberts intrigue, cloak and dagger. It sounds like more dagger than cloak. Why don't you take it from there, Karen?
This one to me was incredibly shocking. And as somebody who went to law school, I guess now 30 something years ago, a long time ago, and who has read many Supreme Court decisions and has followed the Supreme Court. I even am admitted in the Supreme Court in a ceremonial role. I've watched arguments there. It is a very storied, special institution where, things you're supposed to be above the law, supposed to be above politics. And there's this tradition where anyone who works there, it is the highest honor, by the way. It's the hardest job to get out of law school, is a clerk for one of the justices on the United States Supreme Court. When you hear a lawyer who has that on their resume, I do not, that they clerked for a Supreme Court justice, it is, they're smart, they're good, they're just incredible. It's truly that level. It's the most elite of the elite if you're a lawyer. And one of the things is there's this collegiality. There's this, they work together. They try to build consensus. They try to be a positive influence on the law. And the people who, even if they were appointed by different presidents, there's this understanding that that the deliberations inside the Supreme Court remain secret, that you don't leak things out of there. And it is just frankly shocking that this level of information and detail is coming out of the Supreme Court. Now, the Dobbs decision that came out, the one that overturned Roe versus Wade, that in and of itself, that we saw almost a near identical copy to the final version before it was released. I don't know that that's ever happened before in the history of the United States Supreme Court. That was just unbelievable. And I know that they've not only tried to investigate that and tried to figure out where that leak came from. Of course, if they know, we don't. They've also tried to tighten things up so that that doesn't happen again. Well, the article that came out by the New York Times this week by 2 incredible reporters, like I think Pulitzer Prize winning kind of article here, this by Adam Liptak and Jody Cantor, because the level of access and information that they got within the United States Supreme Court is just, I think, unprecedented, frankly. I don't know of any other reporting that will tell the secrets and see the secret memos, the things that are never supposed to be the light of day, certainly not while the justice is still alive, not until it is archived in history decades later, when you look back at writings and memos about what went behind certain things from a historical perspective, right? That these things were given access to reporters is just utterly surprising, that there's that level of dysfunction at the Supreme Court and that level of division, that you have people who are frankly acting as whistleblowers, who want to come forward so that the world sees how terrible it is and how dysfunctional it is. And so many of us thought that the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who, frankly, when you see him in court, like I said, I've seen arguments in court, he seems reasonable. He seems like the guy who's trying to bring people together. And yes, he is far, he's right wing, but he seemed to be more of a peacemaker. And a lot of people thought that, and also his job as the Chief Justice is to make sure that not just that the law is decided properly, but that there's trust and legitimacy in the court. And so many people who have clerked on the court and who are court followers and watchers have surmised over the past that he has tried really hard, given the scandals, given Clarence Thomas with his, all his paid for vacations and things by wealthy Nazi memorabilia collectors, that he doesn't report. That was causing the court to be looked upon as scandalous and illegitimate, and people to not feel trust for it. People assumed, oh, he's trying to bring that together, and the Dobbs decision, et cetera, that maybe he was trying to be more conciliatory. But this article actually tells us the opposite, that he was the ringleader in pulling things to the right. And frankly, it gave us a window into 3 really significant decisions, all involving Trump this term, and that he was the guy behind sort of the architect of how these would be handled. Now, one of them was the Colorado decision where Colorado and then other states, but Colorado primarily, was trying to keep Donald Trump off the ballot because he was found to be an insurrectionist by a judge in that state. And I think most people, myself included, who thought, how were they going to rule? They were going to rule that unanimously that no, of course, one state can't take someone off the ballot and use one standard and apply one standard. Another state can do it. I mean, it just didn't pass the kind of smell test of how a functional democracy would work. So it wasn't surprised that they would all rule that way. But what was surprising was the process. And first of all, it was an unsigned opinion, which means none of us knew who wrote it. But this article that the New York Times published said that was Roberts. But it also talked about the other justices who compromised, who all saw this wanting to have a consensus in something like this. That this is one of those things that involves our democracy. It involves a presidential election. It involves kind of you want the court to be legitimate, and you want the court to kind of come forward and come with unanimous consensus law. So it's not a partisan political divide. And that was important to the liberal justices, and Justice Roberts, of course, took advantage of that and went along with it. But so we learned that he wrote that opinion. He was the author of that opinion. But interestingly, the next 2 opinions were, I think, very surprising. So there was one, the Fisher versus United States, which is the one that basically said that the statute of 18 United States Code 1512, obstruction of an official. 18 U.S. Code, 1512, obstruction of an official proceeding, that statute was not appropriate for some of the January 6th cases because it's a white-collar statute that was supposed to be for white-collar crimes involving documents and things, that it didn't apply to crimes of violence and trying to, storm the Capitol for certain people. Maybe it would for others, like with the fake electors, because if you're trying to put in fraudulent elector certificates, that is more white collar-ish, and that could count. And so Fisher kind of clarified that. Now, that was also written by Roberts. What the New York Times uncovered, which was surprising and interesting, was that was originally drafted by Judge Sam Alito. And timing-wise, that was right during the flag controversy, where the New York Times also exposed that he had the upside-down American flag in front of his house, and then the other white background with a green tree flag that was common amongst the January 6th protesters and the January 6th insurrectionists, and is a symbol of MAGA, frankly. Both the upside down flag and this other flag are symbols of MAGA. That came out just days before Judge Roberts then took the case from Alito and he wrote the opinion. And that was surprising. I've never heard of, and I'm not aware of, a case being reassigned from a justice who was part of the majority. So I thought that was also very, very interesting. And rather than trying to make it so that it was neutral, that was a pretty MAGA friendly decision, frankly. But the final one, obviously, is, and the biggest shock of all had to do with the immunity decision and just how he was freezing out other justices like Sonia Sotomayor's attempt to compromise and to reach some sort of compromise language, and that he literally froze her and others out of this decision. And frankly, he's the one who pulled it so far to the right. So it was incredible reporting, but also just shocking in terms of how dysfunctional the Supreme Court is. And frankly, the fact that how this is, how there's no end in sight to this, to how far right they have gone and are going to be and continue on. So that's what I sort of took from all of this.
Yeah, I think we had always thought, and even people that are very close court watchers with a lot of inside knowledge, like Judge Ludig, always thought that, I don't want to say that Roberts was a pawn and was being pulled hard right by Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas, because Gorsuch is now far, far right on things that matter. And now the intellectual center or center right of the court is being held, if there is a center that's holding, by Amy Coney Barrett. I never thought I'd say that of all the people, but it certainly wasn't going to be Kavanaugh, especially after his confirmation hearing and Dr. Ford coming out against him as a sexual sexual abuser. He was never going to recover from that. And so he's center right, but that center right is Amy Coney Barrett, who's quickly becoming the intellectual center of the court. And what we learned from the article and the reporting and the memo leak is that John Roberts is not being pulled unwillingly far right. He's actually the one that is manipulating the fellow brethren, fellow parts, his colleagues there. He's assigning himself all the major decisions. I think you said that Alito wrote a draft. He didn't write a draft, but he was assigned a draft of that. And then Roberts, recognizing that maybe the upside down flag was a bad look for the Alito family as they flew the flag of insurrection, maybe he shouldn't also be writing. But if that was the case, I really don't get where the limits of the ethics are here. If Alito wasn't good enough because he was tainted by the upside down flag, then why did he get to sit in on the immunity decision and participate in the writing of that decision? So that made absolutely no sense to me. If that was the reason that the decision was whipped away from Alito and given over to, and Roberts kept it for himself, then why wasn't he bounced from the other decisions? I mean, at the very least, I guess he says, well, I'm not going to take on, I guess you got to pick your battles, right? I'm not going to get him off the bench on this. So I'm just going to do the one thing I can do as a Chief Justice in assigning decisions, which is to say, I'm taking it back for you. I'm sure there was a conversation between the two of them and a challenge as to why you did that. I'm sure it just wasn't like, okay. So we'll have to hear about that, as you said, in the memoirs and the annals of history, when memoirs are written, when people come off the bench. But the fact that, you know, he basically played Sotomayor, played Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson, and then just wrote whatever the heck he wanted. I mean, the liberals held out, the moderates held out some hope that when Chief Justice Roberts took over, that the part of their position, their analysis would hold. And the thing the one thing you didn't mention that for me was also a great takeaway that I was found shocking, is that I always assumed that the ones that didn't want the decision, that wanted to postpone this decision making on the indictment, I didn't think it was going to be Thomas and some of the conservatives and the right-wing MAGA. They were the ones apparently on the immunity decision that did not want to interfere with the election results and didn't want to issue an immunity decision. And that looks like it might have been Gorsuch and Thomas and one other, maybe Kavanaugh, who said, yeah, we don't want to do that now. Let's not embroil the court more than it has to in this presidential politics and Donald Trump. And it was the moderates and the liberals who miscalculated and said, no, this must be decided right now, because they were hoping there'd be a trial. But there was never, let's be frank, by July, when this decision was issued, given the delays starting back in April with oral argument on the last day of the term, which was set by the Chief Justice, the decision coming out, the last decision on the last day, when decisions are issued in July, when they're all off on vacation and fancy Federalist boot camps, like a lot of them go to on the right side, we were never going to get that DC election case up and running in time for the November election. So I don't know what the Sotomayor and others were thinking, but I would have rather, I think, had the case hanging over Donald Trump with no decision made at all than have the decision that came out that basically gave him wind at his sail for his followers to support that. See, he's immune from everything that he does. But anyway, that's the cards we've now been dealt. And I thought it was a fascinating set of reporting. I agree with you. They should get the Pulitzer Prize for that. They'll be fighting it out with ProPublica, who comes out with some amazing reporting as well. Welcome back. That's a podcast we named Legal AF 4 years ago for a reason, and now you know why. Join us on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on this YouTube channel for MeidasTouch. Where else? We're exclusively there. And you can watch us live record. We had about 22,000 people watching us live record. By the time we woke up the next morning, 500,000 people had already watched the episode. Find out what 40 million people a month already know. That Legal AF is the home of analysis and commentary at the intersection of law and politics like no other. I defy you to find a better show than Legal AF at that crossroads than us. And I got some great news for the 40 million people that already know what Legal AF is. And for all the newcomers I'm inviting now, we have a new Legal AF YouTube channel. Yes, we do. Go to YouTube, help us build that with free subscriptions, that pro-democracy channel in collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network. And just plug in at Legal AF MTN, at Legal AF MTN, and you'll end up on our channel. Free subscribe. I'll be curating on that channel as the executive producer the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Still doing all my work on the MeidasTouch Network. Podcast still stays on the MeidasTouch Network, of course. This is going to be new, exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. At the intersection of law and politics, not blowing smoke, not blowing sunshine, just telling you the truth and giving you the factual analysis and commentary with hopefully a little bit of levity, a little bit of entertainment you can't find anywhere else in the YouTube dial. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF podcast, till my next exclusive content only on the Legal AF YouTube channel at Legal AF MTN, this is Michael Popok reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.